Welcome everyone to this lecture on the machine learning pathway. What I want to discuss in this lecture is just a general idea of a pathway of using machine learning and data science for a useful real-world application, such as creating a data report or creating a data product. Keep in mind, this overview is going to be very broad, and in reality, there's a lot of overlap between the various stages that we're going to be presenting here. And you should also note that we're going to try to distinguish various roles in the process, such as what's the difference between a data engineer versus a data analyst versus a data scientist or ML researcher, and so on. I've often encountered that students, when they're new to the field, have a lot of confusion as far as what's the differences between these titles. You should also keep in mind, though, that there's a lot of overlap between the responsibilities of these roles, and that make it more confusing is sometimes different organizations label role titles differently. So a data analyst at one technology company may actually be a data scientist at another technology company, depending on what their roles do. So again, stuff to keep in mind that what we're showing here isn't set in stone. It's just a general concept overview and hopefully something to guide you as far as reading further discussions on machine learning and various roles within data science. And lastly, keep in mind that we're going to be covering all these steps and topics in depth throughout the course. This is just a high-level overview of the general process and pathway that utilizes a machine learning model and data analysis in general. When we actually get to running machine learning models with Python, we're going to do a much deeper dive as far as what the machine learning process looks like for things like supervised learning versus unsupervised learning. This is basically just showing you how to start from the real world and then create a data product or perform data analysis. So let's go ahead and begin our discussion of what we're calling this machine learning pathway. To begin, it all starts with the real world, the world that you and I both live in. And then there's two situations in general that we're going to encounter. We either have a problem that we need to solve or a question that we need to answer. So to label these in a general sense, it could be something like, how do I fix or change X out in the real world? That could be a problem I need to solve. Or there could be a question I need to answer. So maybe I'm curious of how the change in X affects Y out in the real world. And so what we need to do is we need to somehow create what we're going to call a data product or perform data analysis. And while there's clearly some overlap here between a data product and data analysis, it's important to kind of separate these out in your mind in order to fully understand the pathway. A lot of times, newcomers to the field of machine learning and data science think they need to jump straight away to deep learning to build a very sophisticated data product, when in reality, they just need to perform some relatively simple data analytics. So a data product could be something like a mobile app, a service, or a website, dashboards, and so on. And data analysis falls kind of a little lower than that. It'll be things like reports, visualizations, and communications. And obviously, any sophisticated data product probably has data analysis within it. So there is overlap between these two already. But the main idea is how can we get from the real world to a data product or data analysis, and then hopefully use that data product or data analysis in order to affect change in the real world for the betterment of humanity. So let's start. First, from the real world, we need actual raw data. And this can come from a wide variety of sources. It can come from things like physical sensors out in the field, or it can come from things like surveys, sending out surveys to people for them to fill out with information, and then you can perform a data analysis on that information. It can even come from things that aren't technically in the real world, such as simulations. A lot of self-driving cars actually run virtual simulations in order to get training data. Then there's things like experiments or tracking data usage on someone's cell phone or website or any other realms of technology that they may happen to be using. So there's lots of different ways we can get this actual raw data. And then we have to process and store this data. So we can store it in a SQL database, CSV files, Excel, cloud storage, etc. Lots of different ways and lots of different options for storing this data. And depending on the data format, where the data is coming from, and just the size of the data, different options are going to be better than others. And in general, we're going to label this process of gathering raw data and processing it and storing it as falling under the realm of data engineering. So let's go ahead and combine these two blocks to save a little space. And we'll say that our data engineering step along this pathway is to collect and then store that data. After we've collected and stored the data, we're going to need to clean and organize that data. A lot of data analysis methods and a lot of machine learning models require your data to be in a specific format. So cleaning and organizing the data, that means things like dealing with potentially missing data or restructuring your data in a way where features and labels are organized correctly for your machine learning model, etc. And obviously, there's going to be some overlap between collecting and storing your data and cleaning and organizing your data. And hopefully, a good organization with good data engineering is actually thinking of both of these at the same time. So hopefully you're able to clean and organize your data as you're both collecting and storing it. So there's some overlap there, but we're going to separate out cleaning and organizing your data from collecting and storing your data. Because once you've cleaned and organized your data, the next step is to perform exploratory data analysis. So these can be things like statistical analysis, just things like a simple hypothesis test to answer a question, or it can be things like getting a visualization to explore populations. And in general, this is called data analysis. And the roles that are associated with data analysis can be things like a data analyst or a data scientist, where a data scientist can, depending on the company you're working for, also fall into the role of further along this pipeline where they're working with machine learning models. But we're going to call this step of cleaning and organizing your data and then performing exploratory data analysis as just general data analysis. Now, once we've done this step along our pathway, we have to stop and think. If we were just trying to answer a question, then this actually may be all we need to do. And in general, if you perform some exploratory data analysis and you were trying to answer a question based off the data you collected, this is probably going to be enough. There's going to be some sort of visualization or statistical method that you can run in order to answer this question, hopefully. And that's often the case. So after you're going to perform some data analysis, you're going to use your exploratory data analysis, which is creating that visualization or doing the statistical tests, and you'll create a report, maybe a visualization, or maybe just directly communicate those results to people who are in charge of making decisions. And in that case, you performed your data analysis, and then hopefully you can make a decision or answer key questions that affect the real world. Okay, so what if we need to continue, and instead of performing data analysis, we actually want to create a data product? Well, in that case, after we've done the exploratory data analysis, what we need to do is move on to the machine learning section. So we actually take our clean data, and after we've explored it to understand different trends and visualizations, we're going to be ready to perform either supervised learning, which is the attempt of predicting a future outcome, or unsupervised learning, which is going to help us discover hidden patterns in the data or gain insights into the data. And we're going to cover the differences between supervised learning and unsupervised learning in a lot more detail later on in the course. But just keep in mind the general difference here is supervised, you're trying to predict an outcome here based off historical labeled data. Unsupervised learning, in general, you're trying to discover patterns in the data. So, as I mentioned, in general, we can describe the steps of exploring data and creating machine learning models as the machine learning part of this pathway. And this is where someone has a role such as a data scientist, if they're kind of doing both, or if they're heavily focused on machine learning models or optimizing those ML models, they could be labeled a research ML or ML researcher or machine learning engineer, that sort of thing. And then, once we've created successful machine learning models that we're satisfied with, we can use those models to create a service or a dashboard or an application. And in general, these three things don't live just isolated from each other. They're not mutually exclusive. They're usually all part of some sort of data product. So once we've run the machine learning models and we're satisfied with them, we create some sort of service, dashboard, application, or some combination of all three to create a data product that hopefully can then predict future outcomes or gain insight on data that we weren't able to see before without machine learning, and then use that to affect some change in the real world. Okay, so this right here is our general machine learning pathway. We collect and store the data, clean and organize it, perform exploratory data analysis, and then, if necessary, if that doesn't answer our question yet, we'll create a machine learning model to create a data product to go back into the real world, and then this kind of cycle starts over again. So now that we understand the general dynamics of the data science and machine learning pathway, we can begin to focus on learning various Python libraries well suited for each of these major components. Okay, I hope you're super excited. I know I am to dive deep into kind of each of these different steps and the various Python libraries that are associated with them. I'll see you at the next lecture.